Some wounds close in days, others stay with us for a lifetime. And then there are wounds so deep that seem older than we are, as if we're born to carry them. These are the wounds I would like to speak to today. Not the tidy kind that respond to affirmations or a weekend retreat, but the ones that live at the root of our being, the ones that ache even in moments of joy, the ones that, if we could trace them back far enough, would lead us all the way back to the heart of the divine itself. This is not an episode about fixing or erasing them. It's about meeting them, sitting with them, making them sacred. Because some wounds can be healed, and some can only be honored. And when we begin to honor them, something in life opens that cannot open in any other way. So what exactly is a wound? We all know and can all tell from physical wounds. Someone gets a cut on their arm, puts a band-aid on. Sometimes there's wounds that are emotional. People that are highly sensitive, very open to triggers, traumatized people. This also usually crosses over into the threshold of the spiritual. But what if there's wounds you don't even know how to explain? There are people out there with a longing for something that they can't explain, that comes from an ache that cannot be put fully into words. And so, wounds are not just something that happen to you. Some live in you, and some express through you. And so with that, we should also respect the many cultural and archetypal parallels in which we can learn from the wounded. For example, we have Chiron. And in Greek mythology, centaurs were known to be beastly, half men, half horse, disorganized, primordial. But Chiron was different. He was wise and just. And so he would go around teaching and healing until one day he was struck by an arrow from Hercules. Now, being a demigod, he wasn't able to die from that wound. So he had to go out for the rest of existence, carrying that wound, and to continue living, healing others while he couldn't heal himself. We also have Prometheus. He was a titan in Greek mythology, responsible for creating and aiding humanity. And so what he did is he stole fire from the Olympian gods and he gave it as a gift to humanity. And so Zeus, well, he condemned Prometheus for what he had done. Prometheus was bound to a rock, and an eagle was sent to eat his liver. And to the ancient Greeks, the liver was thought to be the seat of human emotions. And so the liver would grow back overnight, only to be eaten again the next day, in an eternal cycle of wounding. Other cultural references we might know include Batman, who had his parents killed when he was a child, carrying out a lifelong crusade against crime and injustice. For anyone who's seen Lord of the Rings, minor spoiler warning, Frodo was stabbed by a Nazgul blade, and that wound never fully healed and was present even at the end of the trilogy as something that he had to carry within him. Even the story of Arya Stark from Game of Thrones, she represents being separated from family, watching, another spoiler from season 1, watching her father be killed, having to survive and find her way in the world, the separation from her entire family for a large portion of the series, was one that shows her own wounding because she was quite young. And if you've ever resonated with any of these archetypes, note that there's a significance to that. And it's often because they mirror our own archetypal memory in the ways that we have been wounded. And so I myself connect very deeply to the wound and the wounded healer archetype. I had a mystical experience that I came into awareness of this wound. Now, this doesn't exist in the body, in the emotions, in the mind. This was deeply spiritual. And the only way I could describe it was where my heart was, just offside, just off center, you might think. There was an enormous mountain, and it was in the way. And if only this mountain could get out of the way, love could flow properly. My life could flow properly. And it was very, very uncomfortable because this mountain represented something that I couldn't get rid of. And it represented something very deep and heavy within me. Now, during this ritual, I had my spirit guides there, my higher self, and even my ancestors, and we were all trying to figure out what to do. And we kept trying to go deeper and deeper. And the mountain only got larger until we'd excavated and gone so deep that I realized that this was not just a wound that I carried. It was actually a direct connection to the wound of the divine, the wound of God, the wound of the universe itself. This was an archetypal wound. And this is something I've only really felt myself connect to throughout this lifetime when I was alone. It was very hard to feel and connect with it when I was around other people or when I was busy living. Because we don't really know the depths of who we are, at least, without being able to go so far within ourselves that we can understand what it is that we actually carry. And so the weight of this, there was an ugliness to it. It's not that it hurt or it bled. This type of wound hit different. It was the heaviness, the responsibility, and knowing that there was no way getting out, no way of getting out. Just like the examples I listed previously. Sometimes there is no getting out of the wound. Sometimes they are so deep that if most people don't know how to deal with it, this is why people turn to addiction. In my case, it was escapism, through video games primarily. But everyone I see, in some respect, well, that's not fair. It's not everyone, but most people I see have not integrated their own wounds that they carry in life. We'd rather pretend. We'd rather put our best foot forward. We'd rather cover up, hide our blemishes, and present to the world as perfect. In the same way that you go to the supermarket and they present only the best looking fruits and vegetables, because you don't want anything less than perfect. And the wound often represents that. An imperfection within reality itself. It's the shadow of what people actually carry when it comes to their own wounds. And that's something I realized so deeply in my own experience, is that our wounds should be seen and held as sacred. How quick are people to just go to the doctor when they have something that feels not right, even though they've spent decades refusing to listen to their body? How many people have a very disturbing experience happen, and then the first thing they do is try and pretend it didn't happen? This goes back to the 5 stages of grief. The first one is denial. Grieving is a huge part of the healing process. But what I realized so deeply is that not only do I carry the wounds of my ancestors, and in some respects, the world and culture itself, but I realized that a lot of my own wounds that I carried as an individual in this life really were a mirror of something else that I was trying to tap into deeper. And so when I came into the full awareness and accepted this, there was a ceremony and there was a party, because it's not something anyone, most people at least, don't want to take on. A life where they connect with so deeply and look at and accept the wounds, the imperfection, the pain. And everyone was celebrating, and it was such a beautiful experience. And I realized just how sacred our wounds really are. And so, the nature of healing our wounds, it really depends on what level they exist. As I mentioned before, we already have physical wounds. We have medics, we have surgeons, we have supplements, we have band-aids, we have physical wounds is something that I feel the world does a relatively good job at. Psychological wounds is still a growing space. We have therapists and counselors. Now inner work and facing your own shadow is now something that's becoming more popular and accessible to find information on in today's world as well. And Jungian psychology teaches us about the collective shadow, to know that not only do we carry our own, but we're also part of a collective that's expressing them as well. We have ancestral wounds, the energies that we inherit through our bloodline, some that our higher self brings over across lifetimes as well, to resolve through a particular family. We have shamans and energy workers to help with these kinds of wounds. We also have societal wounds, as I mentioned with the collective unconscious from Jung. We're playing out collective belief systems in our culture. It's very easy to look at the next culture over and say how backwards they are. Or even look politically, for example, at the side you don't follow and everything wrong with them. But we're not really looking at our own shadow and what we're putting out without considering and unifying the other side as well, and working with the oneness that is the universe. We might see these societal wounds through systemic injustice. We might see oppression. For example, you might look at the growing wealth inequality, and you might look at the way, a common one I think of goes back to the boomer generation, calling Gen Z and millennials just lazy and wasting all of our money on avocado and toast. It's something you'd read on the internet or watch on TV. It's quite nonsensical. While they fail to account for the shadow of how the financial system has become so bloated with debt. And the interest rates are so low that the price of everything has skyrocketed. Getting ahead is a lot harder. And so this also represents the wound of separation through society, because we're actually not unifying. We're not seeing ourselves as one. And then last of all, we have the cosmic wounds. And this is something I connected with very, very deeply. That even the separation from source, the separation from being one with all that is, it's so heavy, it's so painful, it's so beautifully tragic, it's poetic in its own sense. Because a wound like this cannot be healed in its totality while we're still incarnated. We can come to some degree of gnosis and remembrance that we are one. But separation from the infinite love that is available through the all is something that we have to live seeking to find. That is its own path of healing. And so even holding a wound like that sacred, even understanding that separation from the divine itself, is something we all struggle with in our own right. The confrontation of that is really how we can begin to understand how all other forms of wounding occur as well. Understanding this is key. Understanding the wound for what it is allows us to recognize that we might carry it, but it's not who we are. It's just an expression of the all. It's just an expression of us as we exist. And so there are many reasons to avoid the wounds. I already touched on it before. Pain is an enormous one. Anyone who tries to tell you reality is just a simulation and none of this is real, say that to someone whose wound is hurting. Say that to someone who is in direct pain right now and see how they treat you. Pain is a very clear sign of a wound. And this is not just physical. We might see it and feel it through rejection by our family, by our friends, or even by the society at large. To confront something big like that, to be ostracized or even exiled, is a much bigger wound than one person seemingly can deal with on their own. And another one is why we avoid the wound, is this culture of toxic positivity. I've worked in workplaces where you have to smile, you have to look good, and to not be happy and fulfilled is treated as a problem. It's treated as an issue to be fixed, a hole to be plugged, and a challenge to be resolved. I recall every year there was the Are You OK Day. And it was really just a song and dance. I remember in one job I was struggling and I'd gained a lot of weight. And this would be the day that people would actually, if they did, would just have the heart-to-heart and just ask me to honestly open up. But given everything else, the wound had to be protected because it would be too much in the day-to-day to confront and expose and be honest about it. But on these days, I particularly got frustrated that I even let my frustrations out about it. That I think it was shallow and it didn't really respect where people were at. I didn't make it about myself. But that how I felt most people didn't really care and they just use a day like this to make a big deal. Very much like there are certain people in our lives that won't bother to think about us until it's our birthday and they'll send you a message or they'll want to catch up. And then they'll forget about you the next day again. And so this avoidance either at the individual level or even the collective, it creates these blocks within ourselves. It creates blocks for us being able to express ourselves in the totality of who and what we are, and the wounds themselves. And so when this happens, these blocks distort our own lived experience because we can't flow. I think back to when I used to watch The Simpsons as a child. There was one clip that I saw through just a YouTube reel that showed how Lisa was very depressed and sad. And Marge, her mother, was trying to do everything to make her happy again. And it wasn't until the end of the episode that Marge just accepted that Lisa might just need to be sad. And the moment that Marge did that and stopped trying to fix it is the moment Lisa started to heal. And I thought that was a really beautiful sign. It really shows that the way we think we even face these wounds is not always by doing something. It's not always by trying to fix it. And if we don't honor that, then we could be quietly sabotaging ourselves and sometimes others from being able to, in an honest and a healthy manner, even begin to face, confront, and heal their own wounds. And so what I'd like to do now is hold sacred space for the wounds that we carry individually, collectively, and cosmically. Because sacredness is the way that spirit works. Holding with deep reverence every aspect of reality itself can be seen as sacred. There's sacredness even in the mundane. But how we can see our wounds as sacred is by recognizing them, letting them know that we see them, respecting the fact that they exist rather than trying to avoid them, and where required, tending to them. Some can be treated, some can be cured, and then some can only be acknowledged. But even the acknowledgement itself can allow those who carry wounds, like myself, that stifle your ability to live life. Acknowledgement itself is the only healing that is required. Because then it can allow us to move forward acknowledging that we do carry wounds, and it's okay. It's okay to live a life and be wounded. Not to glorify the pain, but understanding that the role it plays is not only significant, but it shapes our very identity. And so the wounds that we carry, these can be incredible sources of depth. We can learn so much about ourselves through exploring our wounds. It can teach us so many lessons, such as inner fortitude, resilience, courage, and ultimately it brings us back to the holistic notion of who and what we are, to live off a more authentic life. Because we don't need to shun or hide a part of ourselves that not only don't we want to see, but more often than not, other people in the world don't want to see. And so the wounds that we carry, they're not mistakes. They're not weaknesses. It's just proof that you've lived, loved, and been shaped by forces that are larger than you. You do not need to rush for closure. You don't need to pretend that these wounds you carry are gone. You only sometimes need to give it the dignity of your presence And that's all it requires. And when we make our wounds sacred, we no longer have to be someone who just suffers. We are someone who begins to walk with the living memory of the universe in and through our body. And that, whether we chose it or not consciously, carries its own form of power. If you love what you're listening to, leave a comment below. If you're listening on YouTube or Instagram, let us know what resonated with you. And until the next episode, keep discovering the truth of you, because you're too big to be this small.